Hey, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Wassup Conversations, a podcast with icons of pop culture. I'm your host, Hamid Reza Nikufar, and in this episode, I have an amazing sound designer and audio director as my guest. He's the audio director of the upcoming Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and he has written the ultimate book about game audio mixing. His book is a top seller on Amazon, and it's titled Game Audio Mixing: Insights to Improve Your Mixing Performance. I'm so happy to introduce my awesome guest, Alex Riviere. In this episode, we talk in depth about mixing games, sound design, music, and Alex's journey to success. Before we begin, please make sure to subscribe to Wassup Conversations podcast on YouTube and other podcast streaming services if you're enjoying the show. Thank you very much. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Wassup Conversations, Alex. Congratulations on your amazing new book, Game Audio Mixing: Insights to Improve Your Mixing Performance. I read the book and I think it's a necessary book for newcomers and also experienced professionals. It's very well written, easy to read, and full of insights from veterans of the industry. How's the response to the book so far?
Hey, thank you for inviting me in the podcast. I think I'm actually quite puzzled by the reception of the book. It's been the game audio community and the audio community has been amazing. I've seen people sharing a lot of pictures on social media, people smiling with the book. So that means it made people happy, and that's what I wanted. I received a lot of private messages as well. So it's been amazing so far. I think the book has been rated top new release on Amazon, for example, for like a month after release. So it's been amazing. I think the best way to continue support the project for people that want to support it is to continue posting pictures, of the book on social media, and yes, of course, leave some reviews, on Amazon and whatever website where you can find the book.
Yeah, it was something really fresh because this is like a few months ago, first time I saw it on your Twitter page that you mentioned that, soon you're going to publish this book. And I was like, come on, really? There's a book about mixing video games? I've never seen something like this. So it's a unique book, and it's weird that we don't have enough resources and discussions about mixing games. I myself started out clueless, gradually developed my own approach, and then by talking to people more experienced than me, I figured out the way. This book, however, could be a great spark for people to understand game audio mixing better.
Yeah, that's the idea. Like there are very few resources, to no resources available online, or so about game audio mixing. It's not a new topic, but it's being brought right now in the industry between different game audio industry veterans and different companies. And for me, the dream is that book can contribute, of course, to the game audio community, to the industry, and also that's somehow, hopefully soon we'll get some new sort of positions created in the game industry with mixing supervisors. I don't think you can have mixing engineer per se because it's a very collaborative effort. When you make a game and you have a lot of sound designers and music designers and voice designers adding things on the game built every day. So that's a collective effort in that way, but I still feel that you need someone to supervise the mix and to make some creative decisions, especially when it comes to the final mix. It's never final. It's just released, It's never done.
Exactly.
But right now, that responsibility is kind of on audio leads, sound supervisors, or audio directors. And when talking for me as an audio director, when I do the mix, it's going to take weeks if it's a big game. Months sometimes. And that takes time away from doing audio direction, like creative direction of the game, because your focus is very different. You are playing with the materials you have and you make the best of it and you make creative choices like, I don't need to hear that. I want to hear more of this. This should take the focal point and this can go in the background. And sometimes, of course, we will send back sound effects or music stems for rework, but you're not doing audio direction in that case because the mix should serve the audio direction. If that makes sense. So that's the tricky part, and I really hope and wish that we'll get those new type of positions created soon in the game industry, because for me that's the next step.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how much it's going to improve audio in indie games, because a lot of those people are exposed to, like, in connection with other veterans, like AAA audio masters. But some of them are just one guy making the entire game himself and doesn't have time to just go about the mixing and all of that. But reading this book kind of gives you an idea, like the possibilities of things you could do. And it creates ideas. And I love these portions that you talk to audio directors, composers, and they gave the examples about the way they mix, the tricks they have, and it's kind of like inspiring. Like, oh, what can I come up with next? Like, this is going to change. I hope people kind of read it more. Not only people in audio, but anywhere involved in the video game, so they kind of have more, because
that's one of the core idea, right? I wanted to make it accessible for non-audio people as well, like producers, designers, so that eventually it can help to develop awareness as well in other disciplines. There is a full chapter about strategic planning, which is basically planning, resources, budget, and those kind of things. And I think that one is understandable by anybody working in the game industry with enough years of experience. You know, if you're just starting your job in a game industry, it might be a bit hard to absorb all the information. But for folks that has been in the industry for a year or two at least, I think that's a lot of valuable information. And the idea was that mixing is not tangible, you know, by essence. If you tell a producer, oh, here you have a big explosion in the game, but there is no sound. Okay, you're going to make the sound design, you're going to make a sound effect. It's more than that, we know that, but it's tangible, right? See something, you have a sound associated to it. When you tell producers that, oh, I'm going to mix the game for 2 months, and I need Jiras for that, and they're going to be like, what? But actually, what are you doing? I can play the game, I hear all the sounds. Like, well, so it's not tangible, it's not something that you can grasp. It's audio already is more abstract than visuals or art, but mixing is a discipline within audio that is not even really a discipline right now in game development. You have voice design, music design, sound design, and audio programming or audio tech, and technical sound design. And soon, hopefully, we'll have that new family, which is mixing as well. And that was the idea, you know, to make a book that can speak to anybody, so you don't necessarily have to be an audio person to understand everything. And it's cool that you mentioned the other guests in the book, you know, the people that came and participated, and it was a good way for me to add nuances in what I was saying in the book, like the insights, because there are more than one way to do things. It's technical, but it's a creative job. That's the part that I was trying to explain in the book. That's why I don't necessarily go into very technical, like, oh, remove that frequency and compress like this if you want that effect, because I feel that kind of things you'll do by experience and by taste as well, and you should know your tools, right? But so I rather take a creative approach to mixing, and I wanted to add nuances and other people that have a different perspective or that works differently. So the working process was that I drafted the whole book with all the insights, and then contacted a few people that I admire the work, basically, and that have different background, that work on different type of games, but that also have a very different aesthetic in the games they've been working on. And then we've been through all the insights. I was like, every time you disagree with what I say, please tell me, because next step is to make an interview, and then I'm going to prepare questions on those topics. So that was very interesting. And then I wanted to show that, there is many different ways to do things, and that we all have a different perspective as well to sound.
Yeah. So before we go into detail about game audio, let's start with your background. How did you start, and what led you where you are now?
Okay. So that's a bit of an unconventional journey. It took me roughly 7 to 8 years between the time I decided I wanted to work in games, applying, you know, for any positions really, from audio director to intern. I was like, any positions I will apply. And it took me 7, 8 years probably from that point to breaking into the industry with a in-house job. So after studying computing at the university and then sound engineering, I started my audio career in the music industry in France. So I was composing and producing music for top French urban artists, basically. And I was in contract with Sony ATV Music Publishing at the time. And then in 2008, I think, after doing that for a few years, I decided that I wanted to change something in my life. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start by what I do every day, because it was taking all my time, like really from 9 a.m. in the morning to 3, 4 a.m. in the next morning. I was doing music production, going to studios. I was a studio rat, basically, at that time. But I learned a lot, working with very experienced music engineer, mix engineers, and really good artists and musicians and everything. But I decided back then that, okay, I want to change and I want to do something else, because I don't think I can do that for 20 or 30 years. And that's when I started to be serious about working in game or in game audio. So that's when I started to apply for any positions. And I failed miserably many times. After doing that for that few months, I was like, okay, maybe I need to move country and try my luck somewhere else. Because in France, that was not that many companies back in the day that could hire sound designers to start with. So even less companies that could get interns or junior positions. That was probably only Ubisoft back then. Now the industry is bigger in France, but it was not the case, back in the days. And audio was also a smaller discipline within game development worldwide. So I moved and I relocated to China.
China!
I moved to Shanghai because I wanted to learn the culture and maybe learn a little bit the language. And so we moved there, and then I found a job in the post-production studio as a post-production supervisor and a studio manager, because there were nobody managing the studio. So I ended up managing the team and doing accounting and business plans and business development, as well as supervising the sound design, voice sessions, music composition and recordings. And been working on a lot of commercials, documentaries, TV shows, corporate films, and a few game trailers. And I still wanted to work in games back then, but I was like, okay, well, that's just a step, and that's it for now. And I had a lot of fun, but I've been doing that for like 3 years probably, and I was still applying to any game audio-related jobs during those years, like nonstop, keeping myself updated with any job ads online on a weekly basis. So like every Monday morning, I will grab my coffee, go on LinkedIn, on different websites, and look at any audio position in the game industry, apply, move on with my week, do the same the next week. I failed miserably for 3 years again. Nobody reached out to me. I think I had only a handful of interviews. And eventually I decided to leave the studio and to try my luck as a freelancer and contractor, to get started with small indie gaming gigs, because back then, most of the feedback I had from recruiters or hiring managers was that, okay, music, okay, post-production, mixing, recording, but you don't know game audio, and that's a very different field. I have to say that I disagree with that, and I disagreed already back then without knowing anything about it probably. But right now I feel I also disagree with it. And that's where I'm like, okay, then I'm going to make a portfolio. I'm going to do some small indie gigs. There were a lot of those in Shanghai and in China back then. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start with that. And I branded my work as a game audio lab. That I'm like, okay, if I have game audio in the name and I brand it, then people will be like, oh, that's the game audio person.
Oh, that's smart.
And that worked perfectly well, because very quickly I started to have too many clients and projects. So I think after freelancing for like a month or two, I had to build a team, secure a location, find a place, build a recording studio. And we ended up with 3 full-time employees, a proper company registered, a studio and office rent, people management again, accounting, and then business development. It was a lot of fun. And we worked on plenty of games during those 3 years. I think we worked on like 25 to 30 games, different areas, right? So like from managing the audio localization, so the casting and the recording of the Chinese version of some big games like Call of Duty Online or Final Fantasy XIV, for example, and some other ones as well, to doing sound design and music for some mobile games. And then eventually, at some point, I was starting to work with CCP Games, and that became one of my main clients with another one. And once we've done all the assets, music, voiceover, sound design, processing, we delivered all that to them, and they invited me in the studio to play the game. And I remember that I was not so happy about the implementation and the mix, and also by some of the sound effects, because then you hear them in context and everything playing together. And then I was like, okay, we can't work like that. We can't just make content and deliver that, and then it doesn't sound like what we wanted it to sound. So I think it was a Friday at 1 p.m. or something. And then I was like, what do you use? They're like, oh, we have Unreal and Wise. I'm like, you have a computer I can use? Yeah, sure. Boom, get latest. They got me a seat, and I started to work in Wise. And then around 8 p.m. on the Friday, I called the executive producer. I'm like, okay, come listen to that. That's what you had before. That's what you have now for a very small portion of the game. He was like, okay, yeah, that's really cool. Do you want to do more of that? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then eventually, CCP Games proposed to hire me full-time as an audio director in their Shanghai studio to build an audio facility, hire a team of game audio professionals and everything. So kind of sold my company to my audio localization client back then. So they took over the facilities and passed over the knowledge about voice casting and voice talent and the voice recording pipelines in China. And then my team moved with me to CCP Games, and we opened a new studio facility over there. And yes, finally had my in-house, game audio job that I've been looking for. So long story short, it took me 8 years. My first in-house job was audio director. Even if probably 4 years before I was applying as an intern, trying just to get some gigs and stuff. But also I think that I've built plenty of experience working in music and then post-production and then assets creation and management and studio management, people management, project management, and audio localization, where you handle, thousands and thousands of voice lines to record and then edit the next day or clean the next day with a different team and everything. So took me some time, but I think it was a very beneficial experience because, all my knowledge right now and my all the things that I like to do when I mix, when I direct sounds is because, I know music, I know music production, I know post-production as well. So it's kind of a melting pot. I take the best of both worlds and I merge everything into one gaming experience. And that's very much what I like to do.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. And you, as I mentioned, you were leveling up, just becoming this professional and suddenly a big break. Yeah, that's great. So one of the best ways to learn about audio in games and how to approach sound design, different elements, is by listening to other people's work, similar games and projects with amazing audio. So when you're playing a game casually or with purpose, how do you listen to it? And what are the things that you're focusing on the most? And how do you learn from the work of others?
So when I buy a game, it's always to start playing casually, but after 10 minutes,
I end up
playing on purpose and analyzing everything. So, but audio for me is part of the game experience. So when I play a game, I always listen, of course, and I always ensure that I have a decent listening environment. So headphones or that I like, or speakers in my living room. That's the setup that I know.
What headphone do you use for gaming?
It depends on what platform I play. If I play on PC, I have my Aerodynamics here. If I play on PS4, I have one of the PS4 gaming headset that was good. I also use it to test my mix because I used to play other people mix with that pair of headphones. So I bring it to work as well, and I play with that. And I have the Devialet Gold stereo as a speaker setup at home. It's better for music than it is for movies and games, but it sounds pretty cool.
All right, so yeah, you were talking about the listening with purpose in order to just kind of learn about audio from other games.
Yeah, without the sound effects, the voice, the music, and the good mix, to me, the game experience will feel incomplete, right? So when I play a game, if I don't think the audio is at the quality it deserves, I just stop playing. It pulls me off of the experience right away.
And it happens to me too. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say I always listen critically, I guess. Even it always starts casually, like, oh, cool, I'm going to play that new game. And if I don't like the sound, I just stop playing. Whatever the gameplay mechanics or whatever. And then it goes with the sound, but also the visuals, the mood, the overall like audiovisual experience is something that is very important to me. So yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite games regarding their sound?
I think it goes back to the same idea, right? Is that my favorite games regarding audio are usually my favorite games, I think, because I like that overall experience to be cohesive. So favorite games regarding audio. So I'm very much into realism and hyper-realism in terms of style. So I'm not a big fan of things that are overly designed. It's just my personal taste.
Yeah.
So I would say the Last of Us series, that's something that I really like audiovisually and narratively, and the Red Dead Redemption series, the Uncharted series, that type of game. I'm very much into action-adventure. The God of War series is really good as well. Maybe a bit different. I really enjoyed back in the days Journey and Abzu. Probably also because of the game design flow and the amazing music from Austin Wintory, and the relationship between music and sound effects, and how all of that blended together and created a very unique experience. For me, it's those games where audio is all about setting up the moods, being at the right pace, having the right staging in the game, delivering the right information, then having always that balance between music, sound effects, and then boom, next beat and something else happen. And that's what I enjoy the most, basically.
Yeah, recently I've been playing Diablo 4, and it's amazing. It's just perfect mix of music and sound.
Right. I haven't played it yet. Been a bit busy lately.
I know.
Hopefully soon I can start playing games.
So you've mentioned some great techniques to judge your mix in the book. How do you listen to your own work, and when do you decide that what you have is working fine? And when do you move on? I know it never ends, but as Da Vinci says, the art is not finished. It's just you just let it go. Yeah,
it's abandoned.
Abandoned.
It's abandoned. It's time. And that's basically how I work. So when I mix, I define the goals for the mixing session. So usually per day or per half day or per week. But if I do per week, then I still have my goals per half day or per days. And then I need to achieve the goals within the expected time. Let's say time being the day. So like if I'm not done at 6 p.m. and I still have a little bit I want to do, I will do that little bit. But I will not push it much more than that. So I time box it, and then I move on to another feature or another quest or another scene the next day. And then I play with other people in a different listening environment to the mix. So the mix, I do it in different passes, right? So you have the premix of the features and everything, the premix of the quest and everything, and that's mostly done by the audio teams. Then I supervise, provide feedback. Maybe I will get hands-on a little bit, but for example, if I use a middleware like Fmod or Wise, I will go in the middleware and do a little bit of cleanup in terms of loudness, frequency spectrum, so I make sure that everything finds its space. And then I play through, and then I mix live, even if it's not, you don't have a fader that you ride, up and down like you do in post or in music. So I set up my goals, I mix something. So let's say I mix quest number 3 on Tuesday, then on Wednesday, I will move on to another feature or another quest. And after a few days, I will play what I had mixed in a different listening environment and with people. So I like to mix alone because I don't want to have people behind me and being like, I'm not sure. You know, when you want to take creative risk, you don't want someone to do the face. Like, what? Does it sound wrong? But I'm not done. I don't know. Maybe it's wrong.
It holds you back from
experiencing. Exactly. Yeah, you need to experiment a little bit, because if you don't do that, you don't take risk. You just go for whatever works or whatever you know. And I think you have always to push yourself when you mix and to take some creative risks that are controlled. And then, of course, you test that on other people. Yeah. And when we play those in the different environments, so either we are all on headphones or a larger room or a smaller room, I really need to change the room as well, so that I don't want the middleware to be open. I just want the game built. We play holistically and we just focus on playing the game, not like looking at, what sound was playing here or whatever. And usually I like to play in a bigger room because it's important to evaluate the low end as well. And you don't look at your audio tools. You just play the game in the expected way. You listen to others. Everybody take notes. You embrace feedback and collaborative work. But then eventually you decide, okay, do I address the feedback or not? But usually you address the feedback. Maybe not 100%, but you find the in-between, because maybe you wanted to do something creatively, but you've been too far. And then someone was like, okay, that pulled me off of the experience, and you find the middle one, right? Then I go back to my mix setup, I address the notes, and I move on to other things. Then I play through again, and again, and again. And that's a loop until we ship the game, basically. And then when you time box your mix sessions, I usually like to put it on a production timeline, so I can do some retro planning. So for example, I will use Jira, and I'm going to do a first rough estimate. To mix that quest, I need half a day. That one is only 2 hours, it's small. That one is a day. But then when you play, you end up experiencing some features. That sounds wrong. So boom, I put it in my backlog. And then I like to retro plan, so I can see, okay, is my estimate making sense with the timeline, the production reality, or do I need to time box? And usually you have to time box. And that's when you're like, okay, I cannot spend more than half a day or 2 hours on that quest. And you prioritize as well, like which ones are the most important, which ones or which features are the most likely to be played for the longer time by the players. You know, those kind of things. And then you might have to take shortcuts in the mix. And that's all right, I guess, because what you want is for the full product or the full game to sound good at the end. So you don't want to get stuck into mixing the first few hours and then ship without having mixed the rest, for example. So to me, a good mix is one that is consistent from the beginning to the end of the experience. In comparison with a mix that would be amazing for the first hour of gameplay, and then not so good for the next 10, 20 or 30 hours. And I think all that comes from experience, knowing how fast you work, knowing your tools, knowing how much you can achieve within the time, what shortcuts you could take to achieve your goals within the time frame, and also when to take risk, because you don't take risk. Or when I say risk, it's creative risk, right? You don't take creative risk everywhere all the time. It's like, okay, cool. I can spend 1 or 2 more hours today. So do I want to go back to another mission or another feature where I had that idea and I want to try it out, or do I just move on? That's basically how I plan my work.
Yeah, and the game is something alive and it changes. For example, a mechanic is just like, for example, something is happening every 6 or 7 seconds, and then suddenly the game changes and this should happen every 2 seconds. And when you're listening to that, you're like, all right, this is gonna be annoying. So the entire mix on that specific device or item is changed now. So it's not ultimately all up to you, but you just always have to check the new elements and everything that changes inside the game. And what's great is that you set goals for it, as you've mentioned. And you've mentioned in the book too, that you always, before sitting down and doing a mix, you set goals to it. Like, okay, today I'm going to focus on the, for example, the footsteps of the main character in the cave, and how, or this quest. You just don't scatter your mind around.
No, you can't do that in game development because you will just lose your mind. The games are very big nowadays, and as you were saying, they are changing all the time with hundreds of people changing the game every minutes or every hours, getting a new update. So you have to know what you want to mix in advance, because that's based on your production timeline, but you kind of also have to know how you want things to sound. Like if I decide to mix a feature that was already premixed by someone or by a few persons, then you have to think about, okay, what it is I want to do. Why am I doing this? Should it sound differently? Do I just want to add clarity? What is your creative aim? And then once you know that, and you evaluate the size of the feature, and then you can say, okay, I can do it in 3 days. I'm going to focus on adding clarity with EQ, volume, and state mixing, and parameters or variables or whatever. And then you go for it.
And after like kind of like a response that you get from playtests, and the mix changes. For example, I had this experience for the game I'm currently working on, that the game was out for playtest, and all these huge musical moments, sounds, and all that. And there were like so many comments about I love when the main character touches his hand on the wall, the sound it makes. It was like, this is the smallest thing that I didn't think that they would mention about it. But then you realize, the interactivity of the main character to the environment could be something special that in this particular game, the audience is going to enjoy it. And they're not sound designers. They're not focused that much on audio. So suddenly everything changes. Like, these subtle little elements are very important to their ears.
It's important to hear feedback from audio people, because it usually ends up being more technical feedback. And then to me, it's even more important to receive feedback from non-audio people.
Yeah.
So when you do playtest, or when you have external playtesters to come and test the build, you receive what I call like experiential feedback. And they are not about, the sound of that gunshot should sound like that, and you should probably cut 250 hertz a little bit, and remove the mud, add some space, boost the low end. It's all about the feel of the game, and very often they touch upon things that we are conscious of, audio people, but that's not a priority for us, because they go, it's just a thing, it's fine. I should rather focus on that big sound with high SPL and large frequency spectrum, and people will pick up on other things. So that's always very very interesting to hear, and then to ask yourself some interesting questions about, okay, do I need then to push that more? Do I need to approach it differently, and whatnot?
Yeah. So how many setups do you have to check your work? I mean, how many systems do you check before like you're satisfied with the mix?
I usually mix in 5.1 in a smaller room, like a control room, like the one I'm on right now. Then I will play through in Atmos if I can, in a bigger room with more low end, control the lows, more space between the speakers as well to have a better sense of the panning.
Yeah.
I will test on headphones. I will do 2 runs through on headphones, one with just stereo headphones.
What are the headphones?
Binaural
for the
as well.
What are the headphones for the geeks here? What headphones do you use for the mix? One is that
I use the Beyerdynamic DT990 Pro. That's the one I know. So I always use the same. It's the one I know, basically.
But
then if you make a game for PlayStation, I might also do a playthrough with those ones. Even if I don't necessarily like those, but just because then you want to experience what most people will experience as well, right? So you mix with the headphones, or you adapt the mix. Or usually I will adapt the 5.1 mix I had with the headphones that I know, and I will do some polish on that version of the mix, and then I will play through with the consumer version, basically, or the most expected consumer device, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you also check your mix on shitty speakers like TV's speakers?
Built-in. Not really. Oh. No, not really. Maybe I should, but no. I mean, it's all about time as well. Like testing a game takes time, and if you have to test your mix on everything, it's then you don't have time to mix. You know.
Yeah, if the mix is working perfect on a standard device, it's basically perfect on everything.
Yeah, we'll do a playthrough towards the end, so like a few weeks before final lock, you know, for final submission of the game or going gold or patch day 1, whatever the milestone. And I will do a playthrough and I will work on the mastering of the game.
Yeah.
And that's also when I will eventually test the game on TV speakers. But same thing, right? I could have access to like 5 different TVs at work and test the game everywhere, but then you just don't have the time to do that. You know? You have to trust others as well. Games are so big these days that you have to tell others, like everybody in the audio team, but also in the dev team. Every time you hear something that feels wrong, send me, create a Jira ticket, send in my way, add a bug, because then you need as many pairs of ears as possible, you know, especially towards the end to make sure nothing falls under the crack, because it's just too big. You can't test every single possible scenarios when you mix a game. But when I do that final mastering pass, near final, it's when I will play the game on different devices for a few hours on that, few hours on that, few hours on that, test my mastering processing chain and see how the game reacts. Like if I still feel like, okay, I can recognize my mix being what should be in the focus is still in the focus, what should be in the background is still in the background, it's not clipping, the low end is not clipping or not taking too much space on that type of speakers or endpoints, then I'm happy and I move on.
Yeah. So usually how long do you stay on a project after it's released on AAA projects? And how long do you mix after the game is released via updates or patches?
It depends, because I've been working on very different games, and some of those games were just live games basically. So I was working on patch updates and DLCs, and every time we had a DLC, we were continuously mixing. So you are always, when you work on live games like that, you're always in the release mode kind of after release. So the 6 months, 1 year or 2 years you're going to work on that game after release looks very much like the last 3 to 6 months when you finish a game, because you have a short time frame.
Yeah.
You have to add new content. You need to build on top of what you had and keep things consistent. And if you're lucky and you have enough time or resources, then you can also go back a little bit to the mix you had before and make some adjustments. Yeah. But usually I don't do that a lot. If I move on to DLC, I'm going to mix this DLC, but except if we receive bugs or complaints, let's say by people, something went wrong, there is no reason to go back to that mix, in my opinion, because as we were saying before, a mix or a creative piece is never finished, it's abandoned. If you abandon it and you go back to it, then you're going to be stuck in that loop. You have to move on.
It's the same when
you define your goals for mixing, you can't be like, I want to remix the full game I already mixed. No, that's it.
You're never going to get it right.
Once you already have hundreds of thousands or millions of people that already experienced the game that way, you don't really want to change that for the other ones. You want everybody to have the same experience, or at least that's my perspective on things, because if not, you get stuck and you cannot move on.
Yeah. So I heard this from Cliff Martinez, the composer of Drive, Neon Demon, and Far Cry 4, that once Nicholas Winding Refn, the director that he's mostly working with, told him that always try to compose the music and oppose the picture, because there's a whole world of possibilities creating new emotions that aren't there in the picture. So based on that, please talk about the mix and relationship between music and a sound in a game. How do you balance this, and how do you have an input on music and how it should be on certain like quest or part of the games?
Yeah. So yes, on the game I'm working on right now, but also the ones before, I was always taking care of the music direction. So which means I will start in pre-production. I will do the audio direction, which is kind of the umbrella for anything audio related. And that audio direction should serve the creative vision of the game, the narrative vision of the game, and everything, but it's very high level, right? And then I deep dive, and then I will go, okay, music. So what's the music style or styles, depending on the game you're working on? What are the goals for music in that game? And then from the goals, the music style, I will start to define maybe different instrumentation to have a different color palette for different, I don't know, areas of the map or the game, or different chapters or different moments. It's very different from game to game, right? And only after that I will define the sound cues. So usually I even define the sound cues. It's clear in my head when I start a project, how it should sound. Music, sound design, mix, everything is usually very clear after a couple of weeks. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's make the vision and prepare for that. So I always take that relationship between sound design and music in consideration during the mix, but also before the mix, because I'm usually heavily involved in music supervision and direction and even music production. Very often I will just ask the composers to provide the stems, work with the music designers, might do some captures of the game and do some mock-ups and try to create something unexpected, compare to what the composer was doing or what people expected to hear in the game. So, and that relationship between music and sound effects is a huge part of mixing a game, but also mixing a movie or other forms of medium. In post-production, it's complex because very often music is expensive. You have a big orchestra, a lot of people involved, and the mixing engineers are not always sure how much they can touch the music or cut it or put it in the back, So it's like they had to build kind of the mix sometimes around that, even if the cue doesn't feel quite right or the right moment, or if the cue is too rich in terms of frequency spectrum or instruments or whatever. But because I have that luxury, to be directing sound design and music, then I can already, before the mix, work on that relationship and be like, okay, here I want to set up the music, but it's here just to add a tonal element to the soundscape. It should not take too much space. And then here, boom, I want to hear something huge in the music with, I don't know, full blast or full orchestra, something very rich and epic. So sound design should take a backseat. And then we already take that into account with the team when we design sounds, basically. But then it's all about finding that balance and making it evolve depending on the situation. So I usually don't like to have the music and the sound design to provide or to try to provide or convey the same message. So because then I have both of them fighting in the mix. So music can be used, of course, to create an emotional attachment with a game, a scene, a sequence, a moment. It can be used for gameplay feedback, but it's also usually less moment to moment than sound effects, right? If you get shot at, bang, you hear it, you move your camera. If you want the music to change, but it's already playing something, maybe you need to wait for next beat or next bar or to have a transition. So it's here to accompany the gameplay, but it's not necessarily here to provide direct moment-to-moment gameplay feedback. But in some other case, depending, once again, on the audio direction, the game direction, the creative direction, if it's a competitive shooter game, maybe you want something different. So it very depends, but it's all about defining the role, of those sonic ingredients, beat to beats, moments to moments, both narratively and gameplay-wise. And to be like, okay, at that moment, I want this and that. But that's also, of course, a collaboration also with the art team, the creative director. Maybe you want to set a mood here or you want to add some drama. Boom, it's dark and it's raining, and then you leave 5 seconds for the rain and then the music kicks in and the rain goes back in the mix. Then it's all about, the beats of your game, the realization of those beats and those moments, how to create unique, memorable moments and fun moments to serve narrative, but also for the player to always understand what's going on in the game with gameplay feedback, and then mixing things over time so you can make it evolve as well, between music and sound design or between sound effects and other types of sound effects.
Yeah. So are you also the person responsible for hiring the composer of a project?
Yes and no. It depends from studios to studios and companies to companies. But usually, yes, I will have a say or a final say on who's gonna be selected. Someone else. You could have a music supervisor if you work on the big project. And in my position, I will present the music direction to the music supervisor and be like, okay, that's what I want. That's kind of the things. Or maybe I want very different musical style for different type of cues. And then the music supervisor will come back with proposals, like 2, 3, 4, 5 composers per type of cue, and be like, okay, for those kind of music, you probably need someone from that pool of composer. They match the style, and then they take into account, of course, other variables like pricing, availabilities, contracting. That's the job of the music supervisors in that case. And then we will receive demos, maybe do a test, and then I will say, yeah, that's that person, or those two can do the job. They're very good, so either or, and then I let the music supervisor decide and work with them the music composition skills. But of course, the style of the composers is very important to me. I always want a composer that is always mastering a specific style. Because of course, we receive a lot of demos from different composers and reels and stuff where I can do everything. And that's typically the type of information I don't like. Tell me that you hate doing orchestral music and you are all into drones and pads and doing something dark. Then I'm like, okay, cool. I know I can go to that person whenever I have a project like that. Maybe it's not the right time right now, and maybe it will take 5 years or 10 years, or maybe we will never work together because I will never have the project like that. But I like to select people that are very good into one style, because then I'm like, okay, that's what they like as well. So it's easier to work with people when they do what they love, in terms of style, aesthetic, and creative.
Yeah. So, let's talk about toys, because people seem to care a lot about them. So what is your DAW and what are your go-to plugins?
Okay, so I don't use a lot of DAW because I work mostly
Pro Tools,
on game engines and middleware. But when I do use those, I'm pretty old school, I have to say. And I use what I know, because I don't like to spend the time or to invest the time in trying to figure out how to achieve my creative goals with new toys. So I use Pro Tools.
Do other sound designers use other DAWs?
Oh yeah, most of the people I see these days in the industry are using Reaper.
Yeah, I'm using
probably
Reaper
for good reason. They do excellent work with that. So it sounds good. Seems convenient. It's cheap as well. It's just that I've been lazy. I'm like, I know Pro Tools from my music days, and I know Pro Tools and Nuendo from my post-production days. So that's basically, I could use Nuendo or Pro Tools. I will eventually get into Reaper one day, but I doubt that I will ever have the time. I will have to be between jobs and take a few months, to have fun with it. When it comes to plugins, same. Always kind of use the same, like Fab Filters, Audio Ease, Altiverb, Waves, Isotope, Sound Toys, and you give me that with Pro Tools, and I can probably manage any mixing situations, I guess.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite film considering the sound?
I don't think I have a favorite films. Our game, sound-wise, to me, it's all about the audiovisual experience and the narrative and the acting and everything. So that's what's the most important to me, much more than sound in isolation. So I'm never like, oh, the sound of that movie was good, because if I do that, that means the movie was not so good, probably, because I noticed the sound more than the film or the narrative. So I won't have a favorite movie sound-wise if I don't like also the narrative, the lighting, the staging, the mood, the actor's performance, the pacing, and everything. So to answer a question, I probably don't have any, or I don't have anything that comes to my mind right now. But then what comes to my mind are, movies that maybe influenced my career or my choice, like Jurassic Park when I was a kid or teenager. I was like, oh, whoa. But again, that's the style I like, realism and hyper-realism. And I was like, oh, all right, that sounds amazing. Back then when I saw that movie, I thought that I wanted to make movies. I'm like, okay, I want to do movies. I didn't know that it was sound or whatever, even if that T-Rex approaching with the glass of water being...
Yeah.
And then the vocalization of the T-Rex and the raptors and stuff. That was amazing work from Gary Whitstrom. But that's basically those kind of things more than I have a favorite movie sound wise.
Yeah. So that's great. This is it. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time, and most importantly, sharing your knowledge with us in this podcast, and especially with your book. It's a great guide for anyone interested in game audio, and I hope to see more of this from other veterans of the industry as well. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you for having me.